So now we've talked about the microcosmic orbit. We've talked about the 3 root locks. I want to come back around to the second breath technique here. So the first one we talked about, the elevator breathing, is really expanding from the belly, the ribs, and the chest, the lower dantian, the middle dantian, and the upper dantian. That's positional breathing. The other piece to this, the other technique to use for this, and that's perfectly fine. You could practice that for the rest of your life and probably have the same benefit and no real difference than this other technique, other than seemingly your ability to actually viscerally, sensationally pull the energy up the spine to the crown, which, if we look at it from the long game play of the Montauk Chia book, the 7 steps to immortality as the Taoists would practice, then that is the overall intent, is to move that life force energy up to the crown and bring it back down. So the soft and open positional breathing is really good for down regulating the nervous system and helping to improve the function of your tissues and your range of motion and your overall tone of your muscles and nervous system. It helps down regulate you. But if we want to go from the energetic perspective, then we use a different breath technique. The original one is just your regular breathing technique, positionally breathing outward and upward, exhaling, relaxing, downward and inward, and then at a point adding the microcosmic orbit to that as well. So the 4-part breath in the microcosmic orbit, both of those, one is positional awareness of the breath and the other is tempo and cadence of the breath. You can use those with both of these techniques. The regular technique of elevator breath, and then that's the first the breath technique. We'll just call that the elevator breath technique of breathing out into each of the dantians separately and then breathing back down. The first breath technique is inhaling outward and exhaling, bringing it back inward. The second technique, the second major breathing technique, is called reverse breathing in Qigong, or Ujjayi in yoga. Ujjayi translates to throat whisper, and reverse breathing in Qigong is how I was instructed, and what it was called is just the opposite. It's the reverse of your normal breathing technique, so it makes sense to be called reverse breathing. But to clarify, Ujjayi and reverse breathing, in the way that I learned both of the separate techniques from 2 different schools of thought, they're actually the exact same thing. There's zero difference between the 2. It is literally just a different name that they use in the 2 systems. Reverse breathing might not even be what it actually was originally called in Qigong, because that's obviously an American word, an English word. I don't know what the Chinese translation is, but for sake of learning purposes and thinking about sensationally and somatically, I think reverse breathing is a great term. I think throat whisper is also a great translation, because when you do the reverse breathing technique, you'll make almost, if you do it right with practice, you'll be able to create a kind of whispering sound with your throat. So if you were to fog up a mirror, clean your glasses, you make this kind of sound. That hot air sound, right? You're kind of making that same sound with your mouth closed on the inhale, where the air, the passageway, because of the Juladhara Bandha, that little bit of throat lock that you're doing, if you can hear it here. You're closing down your throat a little bit. So it creates this restriction in the passageway that makes that audible whisper noise in your throat, Ujjayi, throat whisper. So I think they're both great terms, because somatically, sensationally, the thought of reverse breathing makes sense. Instead of breathing outward into the belly and expanding outward, we're going to do the reverse of that. We're actually, as we inhale, going to follow those root locks, or those locks, the root lock, the navel lock, and the throat lock, as we squeeze down and compress that energy channel, that pathway, and we viscerally kind of suck on the inhale, we create this vacuum. And the vacuum sensation is what is literally pulling that energy up from the lower dantian, from the cauldron, up to the crown, to the upper dantian. The analogy that I like to use is if you've got a really thick milkshake, if you just purse your lips and inhale without any air coming in, like imagine you've got like a blueberry stuck in your straw, where you're like taking a hit of a really clogged joint. So air is coming in, but it's creating this vacuum. You're actually trying harder. You're using muscular contraction to inhale this air. And so that vacuum suction actually pulls the energy up your spinal column. And this is the practice that you want to become more aware of and in control of and attune yourself to, so you can actually intentionally modulate the flow of this energy. So if we think about adding all of these techniques together now, we want to think about applying our 3 locks, our root lock, our mula bandha, pulling in the lingam muscle, the base of the lingam here, the gooch right behind the balls, and then the anus. We want to pull all that up and in, squeeze up and in. And then we want to squeeze deep core muscles and navel, back and up. And then we want to keep the chin tucked slightly and the head tilted forward slightly as we pull back from the head. Okay, so those are our 3 locks, our 3 binds that we're going to help to compress the airway in that. Hold on. Oh, hi, what's up? What's up, babe? Yeah. My clients, the homies. Love you. So, where were we? The locks, the 3 locks, lower, middle, and upper as we're inhaling up. Okay, we're partially restricting the airway so that way we can create more of that suction, and then we're somatically reversing the breath on the inhale. Instead of breathing out, we're breathing up and in conjunction with that navel lock. So we're just following that navel lock and creating a pressure difference to where when we inhale, even though it's through the nose, I'm exaggerating there, we're squeezing up and in. I like to use the analogy of a toothpaste tube. If you've got the top of the toothpaste tube, you take the cap off and there's only a little bit left, you squeeze both sides at the base and then you pull up all the way to the top to get the toothpaste out the top. That's exactly the process here. Or the milkshake also is a good analogy where you're pulling this in on the inhale. If anybody's ever done a Bikram yoga class, a Hatha yoga class where they start and you're doing this breath technique here, you're working on that suction, inhale, Ujjayi kind of breath. It's a little bit different, a little more intensified in that technique, but the exaggeration will really help you land that technique if you know what I'm talking about. So we've got root lock, navel lock, throat lock, Ujjayi or reverse breathing, pulling back and in and up with our inhale, partially restricting the throat so we hear this bit of a whisper sound, an audible inhale and exhale, and then we add the layer of breathing from the pelvis up the back, around the front to the top of the head, pausing for a moment, and then exhaling and relaxing those root locks and allowing that energy to sink down the front of the body back into the dantian and around again up the back. So that is the microcosmic orbit, our 3 locks, our breathing locks, root, navel, and throat. That is our Ujjayi or reverse breathing technique. And that's the 3. Okay, that's the 3 major layers of it. And then the 4th layer would be the 4-part breath, where then we add the tempo. So we would Ujjayi, root lock, throat whisper, inhale with the reverse breath coming up the back of the spine for 4 seconds. We would pause for 2 seconds at the top of that inhale, still squeezing and holding. And then as that focus, attention, and energy starts to make its descent, we exhale and release the muscles for 4, 3, 2, 1. Totally relaxed as we orient the focus of our energy back around the back, and then we begin that inhale for 4 seconds, again coming up the front, 2 pause at the top as it goes around the crown. Totally relax the muscles, exhale, sink the energy back down the front of the body, pause at the bottom of that exhale for 2, totally relaxed, bring the awareness back around to the back, and then squeeze, root lock, Ujjayi, reverse breath, inhale all the way up the back for 4 seconds, hold for 2, and exhale back down. So if you're going to do you can do either of the 2 techniques for this. Again, you can breathe out into the belly, the ribs, and the chest for the elevator breath technique, and you can still apply the 4-2-4-2. You can still apply the microcosmic orbit to that breath. But in that position, I like to just focus on the 4-2-4-2 and the elevator together as you guys originally learned it. Just work on the timing and the position, Then when you have that down, you've practiced that for a while, or you're just intending to spend some time practicing the next layer, the 2nd breathing technique, the reverse breathing, the Ujjayi, then that's where you want to add the 3 locks, root, navel, and throat, and reverse breathe and suck in and up on the inhale. So with the Ujjayi breathing, I recommend using the root locks, or the 3 locks, with that breathing technique. With the elevator breath, I'd recommend just using the 4-part breath and just working again on the cadence 4-2-4-2, 4 in, 2 hold, 4 out, 2 hold. When you do the Ujjayi, each one of these is just another layer. 4 in, 2 hold, 4 out, 2 hold. That's the first part, the 4-part breath. The second technique is 4 in as we breathe up and out, and then 2 hold, and then 4 out from top back to bottom, 2 hold in the bottom. Okay. Then we can add the future layers of the root locking, squeezing and pulling up and in on the way up. Then we can add the reverse breathing or the Ujjayi, and then we can start to add that microcosmic orbit up the back around the front. So these are all layers to where ultimately at the end game, when you're standing in your Zhangzong or Wuji posture, you're able to implement all of them at once. The root locks, the reverse breathing Ujjayi with the microcosmic orbit on a 4-2-4-2 breath count. You're using all 4 techniques at the same time in your Wuji base or Zhangzong base. So that's the goal, is to work yourself up to the point where you can do the reverse breathing technique at a 4-2-4-2 count while engaging all 3 locks and maintaining a cadence of 4-2-4-2 breathing. Once you have that down, of moving the energy and moving the breath, then we can start to add moving the body. But just mastering Wuji and Zhangzong postures, just mastering your standing posture and base and getting comfortable here and learning how to breathe with those layers of intent and move the energy and move the breath in the body in a very specific meditative way is the foundation of the practice, and likely all you need to get 80% of the results you would from Qigong or from a standing energy practice. Is just stand in a position where the spine is oriented appropriately, and then add those layers of the breath over and over and over, and sustain your concentration on that pattern repeating itself time and time and time again. That's the game, focusing on, and you're focusing on one thing, but it's 10 little things to focus on to do the one thing right. Just doing the Ujjayi with all those focused layers in your Wuji positions, that's a lot to work on and practice and master. So that is my highest recommendation, is focus on starting there. We don't need to do anything else until that is crystal clear and clean and practiced and competent, and you can do that naturally. That may take 6 months. If you want to progress on this practice, it's fine watching more videos and trying more techniques, but just know that that base foundation and energy practice and breathing meditation is the juice. That's the juice. That's all you need. And even with yoga, I also recommend just do the base postures. For the first 4 years that I taught and practiced, I only did the base postures. I didn't do any of the fancy stuff, and then 4 years later I started trying some of the fancy stuff just for shits and giggles, and I can do most of it because my body has an appropriate foundation. So same thing, energetic, mental, emotional, spiritual. You want to build a strong, energetic foundation, and just being able to move that energy and breathe in that fashion while you're focusing your attention on these energy centers and creating these energetic circuits in the body is massively powerful. So start there, and then we can add the movement.